What if the sun never rises tomorrow?
Okay, let's just get right into it. If you've been on the internet lately, you've probably seen it. These wild headlines and viral videos making some pretty huge claims about Bill Gates, secret experiments, and a plot to literally block out the sun. I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie, right? Well, today, we're going to peel back all those layers of conspiracy to find out what's really going on.
This right here, this is the kind of claim that has just exploded online. And you can kind of see why. It taps into these very real fears people have about extreme weather, about powerful people, about secret technologies controlling our world. You know, you see planes leaving trails in the sky, you experience a record-breaking hailstorm, and you start looking for an explanation that makes sense of it all.
So what's the deal? Is there some secret group trying to dim the sun and control the weather? Or is there something else at play here? It's time to separate the fact from the fiction, because the truth, well, it's actually way more interesting and a lot more complicated than any conspiracy theory.
And here's where it gets really fascinating. These rumors, as wild as they are actually rooted in a real and very controversial field of scientific research. But it's not about controlling the weather. It's about a potential, maybe even last-ditch effort to fight climate change.
Okay, so here's the absolute crucial point. No, Bill Gates is not personally flying a plane and spraying chemicals to block the sun. But, and this is a big but, he has funded research into a concept called solar geoengineering. And this is exactly where that dangerous half-truth begins, because you gotta understand what that actually means.
So, what even is solar geoengineering? Well, the idea, in theory, is pretty simple. If the planet is getting too hot because we're trapping too much solar energy, what if we could reflect just a tiny fraction of that sunlight back into space before it even gets here? The goal isn't to create some dark, cold world. It's more like trying to slightly turn down the thermostat for the entire planet.
And this whole concept, it isn't some crazy sci-fi invention. It's actually mimicking a natural process that we've seen happen for centuries. When a massive volcano erupts, it literally blasts tons of reflective particles, stuff like sulfur dioxide, way up high into the stratosphere. And those particles, they act like a giant temporary sunshade for the whole planet, causing a noticeable cooling effect.
And we have hard data on this. After Mount Pinatubo erupted in the Philippines back in 1991, scientists tracked it. The average global temperature dropped by about 0.5 degrees Celsius. That might not sound that much, but it's a huge shift on a global scale. And that cooling effect lasted for nearly 2 years. So the research behind solar geoengineering is basically asking, could we do that on purpose, but in a much more controlled, much more limited way?
So if this is all just scientific theory, how in the world did it turn into a viral conspiracy? Well, it all comes down to one specific, very small-scale experiment that was proposed by researchers at Harvard University.
This experiment was called SCOPEX. Now listen to the plan. A high-altitude balloon would go up and release just 2 kilograms, that's about the weight of a bag of sugar, of a totally harmless material, like calcium carbonate. We're talking basically chalk dust. The goal wasn't to change the weather, it was just to study how these tiny particles spread out so they can improve their climate models. That's it.
And yep, this is where Bill Gates comes in. Since 2007, he's given funding to various geoengineering research projects, including this one. And it adds up to around $4.5 million. Now, that's a lot of money, for sure, but it was for research, not for some full-scale mission to blanket the Earth.
Okay, so if it was just this tiny scientific test, why did it become so controversial? Why did it get stopped? Well, it wasn't because of some secret plot being exposed. It was stopped because of a very public and, frankly, a very legitimate ethical debate.
And this is where the whole conversation shifted from, can we do this? To, wait a minute, should we do this? And the questions that came up they're profound. I mean, think about it. Who gets to control Earth's thermostat? Who has the right? And if you cool down one part of the world, what does that do to rainfall patterns somewhere else? Who's responsible if it all goes wrong? It's like opening a Pandora's box with no clear answers in sight.
The charge against the experiment was really led by the local indigenous Sami community in Sweden. For them, this wasn't some abstract scientific debate. They saw it as a direct threat to their land and their way of life. They called it tampering with nature and worried that this tiny test was just the first step on a very slippery slope. Their concerns were real and practical. What could this do to the rainfall we depend on, to the delicate balance of our ecosystem? And they raised a huge point for all of us. There are no global rules for this stuff. What's to stop it from being used as a weapon?
And you know what? That opposition worked.
Faced with these powerful ethical arguments and a wave of public protest, the ScopeX experiment was officially and permanently canceled in March of 2024. The science was just put on hold. And that right there is a huge takeaway from this whole thing. Public debate, these moral considerations, they can absolutely stop even well-funded, high-profile science in its tracks. In the end, the conversation turned out to be more powerful than the technology.
So this brings us all the way back to the beginning. If these secret experiments aren't the cause of the increasingly bizarre and extreme weather we're all seeing, then what is? Well, the answer, according to scientists, is a lot less mysterious.
Here's the simple scientific reality. We don't have the technology right now to control the weather with the kind of precision these rumors claim. The real culprit behind the crazy storms, the intense heat, the sheer unpredictability, it's the documented, ongoing warming of our planet.
Let's just take that golf ball-sized hail in Pakistan. That wasn't some secret machine, it was a weather engine that got supercharged by heat. Here's how it works. The sun bakes the ground, creating this pocket of super hot, moist air. This air doesn't just rise, it rockets upwards into the freezing cold upper atmosphere, forming these colossal storm clouds. Inside those clouds, it's total chaos. Violent updrafts hurl tiny water droplets up where they freeze, they fall, they get coated in more water, and they get shot back up again over and over, building layer after layer of ice until you get these heavy, destructive hailstones that the winds just can't hold up anymore. More heat on the ground means more fuel, more power, and more violent storms.
So here's the bottom line. The conspiracy about Bill Gates dimming the sun, it's false. But it did manage to uncover a very real and pretty unsettling debate. The Harvard experiment was canceled, yeah, but the idea of solar geoengineering, that hasn't gone away. And that leaves us with a really critical question for our future. As the impacts of climate change get more and more severe, are we going to be forced to consider radical solutions that we once thought were just too risky? Which is the bigger threat, the problem we have now or the potential cure?